Hello, welcome to another Today's Decay. We're celebrating births and beginnings of everything important since the dawn of time. It's May 24th, all day. And on this day in 1895, Marcel Janco was born in Bucharest, Romania, a Romanian Jew who experimented with Dadaism, Surrealism, Constructionism, and some other ism. All really fun, great stuff. One of the founding members of the Dada movement, and then left in 1919 and kind of went off on his own, but did a whole bunch of really amazing stage masks and painting and art design for stage plays, and eventually during the 30s, I think, left to go to Israel and worked there for the remainder of his life, always pushing boundaries and doing really interesting, exciting stuff. I'm a big fan of all those isms. Dadaism, Surrealism, Constructionism, I guess, is like those papier-mâché masks he made. I don't know. I'm not really sure what that ism's all about, but I'd like to find out. On this day, 1985, the film Reanimator appeared on movie screens across the globe. Directed by Stuart Gordon, starring Jeffrey Combs. This is a great movie. We did a Phantom Creep Theater presentation of Reanimator. Was that 2 years ago? Must have been 2 years ago. Wasn't bad, I gotta say. We did all right. We did this whole Lovecraft thing where it's been on my to-do list for a dozen years or so, I guess. There was this really great book put together by Lance Thingmaker called The Fantasy Fan, and it was a bound collection of mid-1930s. The first fanzine ever made was called The Fantasy Fan. Charles Hornig was the editor, and he got a bunch of his friends, pen pals, to contribute, and those were like the heavy hitters of the weird fiction world, submitting content to his fanzine that were basically like weird tales, amazing stories type rejects, pretty much, but all high quality, especially in like the modern sense of like what he's able to pull. I mean, I don't really think these people were making a lot of money with their content anyway, but just saying, as it turns out, these are like the movers and shakers, and here this literal high school kid is publishing them in like a small run fanzine in 1935. Super fun. And they were all, I don't even know, extremely expensive, and Lance lovingly reprod it and like bound it together in this beautiful collection. And one of the things that really struck me about it was in the letters column in the back of the fanzine, because it ran for like 2 or 3 years, like 33 to 37, or that's not 2 or 3 years, whatever, something like that, a couple of years, mid-30s. And in the letter column in the back of each issue, wound up becoming like a conversation club, almost like an internet chat room or forum or something like that in the more modern era. You have to think at the time, if you were into weird fiction, you weren't going to be able to turn on the radio. There was no like local newspaper that you'd be able to talk to people about it. Probably nobody in your school or neighborhood was into this stuff. This is like real outsider type content, you know? And in the letter columns, like people started to go back and forth, and as you do, they started to argue and nitpick, like this story deserved to be printed in Amazing Wonder Stories, and not in Ghost Stories magazine because it doesn't fit into like these categories, and this is more science fiction or science fiction rather than it being, you know, pure fantasy or something like that. And then somebody else is like, no, what are you talking about? And it just becomes, you know, like fan insider fighting very, very quickly. And one of the people who was involved with starting these discussions would have been a young Forrest J. Ackerman, who would have been like a teenager at this point. I think even like a young teenager, maybe he was like 14, I don't know. And the people who were answering him back in like a very snippy form were none other than Clark Ashton Smith, Robert E. Howard, and H.P. Lovecraft, all of which were like completely adults getting into this really knockdown internet forum type troll back and forth argument with each other in a public setting that took place not every month, but like, you know, regularly throughout the year for several years in a row. So these adults who were like the titans of their field are ganging up on a young teenage Forrest J. Ackerman, and there's something like timeless and horribly wonderful about connecting with all these people who are like larger than life in a really depressing way. So, because it was, you know, this is a Lovecraft original source material, I was like, all right, we're gonna do this stage play, because like Phantom Creep Theater is like horror hosts, and we spook show magicians, and there's always like a live segment before showing a feature film, and that's just like the way old spook show performers did things in the 20s through 60s, although really they were doing double feature monster movies with like performing in between each one. But that's a long day, and I don't know if people would stay that long. Anyway, so live segments at first, and what we did was we wheeled out their brain cylinders as if it was like Whisper in Darkness, talking about the story ahead of time, and then had their brain cylinders plugged in, and like they came to life and decided to like continue to argue to like, you know, to complete the argument from 90 years in the past or whatever it was, by way of their literary creations coming on stage and doing battle with each other. So you have Conan the Barbarian versus Vampirella versus the Shock Monster versus what did we use for Clark Ashton Smith? Shag-Niggurath? Or I forget what Clark Ashton Smith's monster was that we used. And in the end, giant tentacles a la Cthulhu or something. Yeah, it went pretty well, all things considered. It was actually a plan we had to do at the Necronomicon when we performed in Providence many years earlier, and I made the mistake of telling them ahead of time what we were going to do, and they're like, sounds like too many props. Just get up and tell jokes, please. We'd already made the props, and I'd already like scripted this out, and you know, that was a bummer. But so we shelved it, and then I didn't have like a Lovecraft show that we had planned that I could like mix this into, so we didn't do it. But yeah, our Reanimator show did pretty damn well. I've got like a bucket list, you know, and we're working our way down the bucket list. Another one of our bucket list things is making some Today's Decay merch, which the first one is going to be this grim death artwork from this really amazing Not at Night series published in England in the mid-30s, because it is Christine Campbell Thompson's birthday this month, so she is like the star of the month, and we're going to make Today's Decay merch. If you want it, then you better tell me in private message or something like that, because I'm not a mind reader. I just don't know what you think. So, yeah, here we go. Today, from us to you, till tomorrow, goodbye.